Hotep World, this is your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever and may your memory never die. Today we're going to be talking about the original version of the story that involves the Trojan horse. Many of you know what the Trojan horse represents. Many of you do not. Some of you know what it represents, but you never heard the original story. You have just heard the retellings, and maybe you have seen some modern movies that depict the story about the Trojan horse. But what I want to do with you guys right now, I want to show you the original accounts of the Trojan horse story so that you can know what the ancients had to say. Right now, quite arguably, the earliest version of this story or mention of this story is in Homer's work, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, Homer was a Greek writer who wrote around the 7th century or the 8th century BCE. Okay, now when you look into his work, the Odyssey, book 8, he mentions the Trojan horse, but he mentions it rather briefly. He tells you generally what it was about, but he doesn't go into the specific details, right? In order to get the one of the earliest accounts of the specific details surrounding the Trojan horse, you have to go to a Roman named Virgil, okay, in his work called the Aeneid, okay? And when you look in book 2, he gives you the details of the Trojan horse story. Now, the Trojan horse was used as a war strategy between Greece and the city of Troy. Okay, and this war is purported to have lasted around 10 years. So we're not going to discuss the entire war. We're not going to talk about how it started, why it started, who all fought. We're going to go directly to the portion about the Trojan horse, and I want to show you guys the original account of that war strategy being used. So we're going to go to Virgil's The Aeneid, book 2, and we're going to start here. He says, "But yet, if so great by thy yearning to know of our sorrows, and to hear in brief of the final struggle of Troy, though the mind to remember it shudders, recoiling in grief, I will begin." So he's about to tell you about the fall of Troy, how Greece defeated Troy, and they defeated them with this Trojan horse. So you're about to get the story. He says, "War broken, rejected by fate, the Danaan chieftains, seeing so many a year was now slipping by, with the heavenly cunning of Pallas, built them a horse, in bulk as huge as a hill, whose ribs they interlaced with planking of fir, a votive gift to ensure their safe return home. They feigned it to be, this story of theirs got abroad. There, in the lightless sides, they stealthily shut the pick of their warriors, chosen for this by lot, and filled the great hollows inside with soldiery on." So when he says the Danaan chieftains, he's talking about the Greeks. When you look into some of the ancient records, you're going to find people's name different names. We call them Greeks today, but in the ancient world, they had different names for them. But this is what he's talking about. So he's starting the story off saying that after 10 long years of the Greeks trying to besiege Troy, they realized that they would never be able to breach the walls of Troy. So they devised a plan, right? They devised a plan to actually breach the walls and get inside of the gates. Now, this plan was to construct a massive wooden horse that he says was as big as a hill, right? And inside of it, it was hollowed out. And so choice soldiers from the Greek army hid inside of the horse. And what they did was they acted like they left that as some type of offering to the gods to allow them to have safe passage back home. They were pretending, the Greeks were pretending to surrender. And they left this as like a offering to the gods so that they could have safe passage when they left. So they built a horse, they hid inside of it. They brought this horse right up to the gates of Troy. They got on their boats and the Greeks sailed off. He goes on to say, "In sight of the land is an island of passing renown, Tenedos. Wealthy while yet stood the kingdom of Priam, now only a bay and a treacherous mooring for ships. Hither they sailed and hid on the desolate shore, we thinking them gone, and sailing before the wind to reach Mycenae. All Troy land, therefore, broke loose from the bonds of grief that had lain upon her for so long. The gates were flung wide, and joyful it was to go forth and gaze on the Dorian camp, the abandoned sites, the forsaken shore. Okay, so this story is being told from the perspective of an actual Trojan, a citizen of the city of Troy. Okay, and so they're saying that they saw the Greeks sail off, but unbeknownst to them, they just sailed off far enough to where they would not be seen by the Trojans in their city, and they hid out on an island. Right, the Greeks hid out on an island and just pretended to have left. And so when the Trojans thought they left, they opened up the gates and they finally came out of that city, and they were so happy because they had been at war for like 10 years with the Greeks trying to besiege their city. And so now they were joyful because they thought the long war was over. And so they were happy and they were celebrating, right? And they were looking at this horse. So he says, some stared at the deadly gift of maiden Minerva, amazed at the size of the horse, and at once Theomotus bade us haul it within the walls and give it a place in the citadel there. 'Twas a traitor speaking, perhaps, or haply the doom of Troy would thus have it be. So when they saw the horse, he's telling us that one guy immediately said, we need to bring this horse inside of the gates and put it up at the citadel, right, inside of the city. And so the author is saying that they don't know if this guy was actually a traitor, if he knew what was going on with that horse, or if Troy was just fated to be doomed and some people wanted to bring the horse in. But it's possible that that guy was actually working for the Greeks the whole time, right? But Cappius and those who sounder counsel and those with sounder counsel in mind bade us hurl the suspicious gift as a trick of the Greeks into the sea, or fire it with flames from below, or pierce and probe the secret hollows within. The rabble, perplexed in opposing parties, was riven. So the people were divided about what to do with this horse. Some people said that this is an obvious trick from the Greeks. We should destroy it, right? We should set it on fire. We should stab inside of it. We should push it off the cliff into the sea. Others were saying, no, we should bring it into the city. So they were debating about what to actually do with this horse, right? Then, foremost of all, with many men crowding about him, Laocoon hastened in wrath from the citadel's height, and cried from afar, poor foolish townsmen of mine, what madness is this? Have the enemy sailed, do you reckon? Or can any gift of the Danaan host, do you think, have no treachery in it? Is this the Ulysses we know? Now, Ulysses is Odysseus. In these Latin works and these Roman works, Odysseus's name from the works of Homer is Ulysses. So Ulysses is Odysseus, okay, from the Odyssey and the Iliad. There are either Achaeans who lurk enclosed in this frame, or itself has been built as an engine against our walls to spy on our houses and reach the town from above, or there's trickery hidden inside. So one guy, in the midst of all the debating, he made it plain. He was like, look, man, have you ever known the Greeks to not try to use some type of trickery? Have the Greeks ever been known to be trustworthy? You guys are foolish if you think this is actually some type of gift that they left, or some type of offering so that they can have safe passage home. We should destroy this horse right now because they cannot be trusted. And what he ended up doing is he ended up taking the spear and thrusting it inside of the horse, because he said that it's probably, like, he was right too though, but they didn't believe him, but he was like, it's probably some soldiers hiding inside of this. And if not, they just want to bring it in so they can spy on us or to overtake us. We've been fighting for 10 years. Why would you trust them now? Right? And so this is what this guy was ultimately saying. So he goes on to say, in the meantime, while they were debating, behold, a youth with both of his hands fastened behind his back, amid loud-voiced cries, some Dardan's shepherds were hauling before the king. Of his own accord, he had placed himself in their way, though a stranger, to accomplish the very end that he sought and open Troy to the Greeks. With confident heart, either way, he was ready to keep on playing his traitorous game or to go to a certain death. So what he's saying is, while they were debating, when this guy Layla threw the spear through, what happened was they looked and they saw some of their own people bringing a young lad as like a captive. But he's saying this young lad, he was a Greek, right? And he allowed himself to be captured by these Trojans. Now, with the hindsight of the author, he's already telling us that this guy, this Greek guy, this young lad, allowed himself to be caught, right? He allowed himself to be caught only so he could try to convince them to bring the horse inside of the city of Troy. So, but it was all lies and it was all deceit. Right? And so when they bring this young lad up, let's see what this young lad does, right? Let's skip down. Okay, well let me say this, okay? And so the young lad, he acted like the Greeks wanted him dead. Right? He basically acted like the Greeks wanted him dead, and he basically defected to the city of Troy, as if he was a defector, as if he was a traitor. And he pled his case that he did not like the Greeks anymore, and the Greeks had turned him back on him, and basically tried to convince the Trojans or the people of Troy that they could trust him. So he says, his wailing softened our hearts, our fury was quelled, and we urged him to speak. What blood was he sprung from, and what was the message he bore? Let him give an account, we said, of what he relied on in letting himself be caught. Then at last, getting rid of his terror, he spoke to us thus. All that I tell you, O king, whatever the outcome will be true, I swear it. So they were debating about whether they could trust this young lad, just like they were debating about whether they could trust this Trojan horse. And so he wailed and cried and lied to convince them that they could trust him, or to at least not kill him on the spot. And so finally, he pulled on their heartstrings enough that the people of Troy was like, you know what? Let's listen to what he has to say. Let's listen to his message. Let's let him explain what happened to him and explain how he came to be held captive by those shepherds and brought before the king. Let him say what's on his mind, and then we will make a determination about how we feel about him, right? And so I'm not gonna be able to read all of that because this is kind of long, but I'm gonna give you a brief summary. What the young lad basically says is that during the war, right, the 10-year-long war, he says that Ulysses, basically did something to violate the gods, and that is why the Greeks could not take the city of Troy, because the gods were not on their side. So they realized that because the gods were not on their side, they were going to lose. So the young man Lion, he said that they beseeched the oracle and was like, what can they do to get the gods back on their favor, right? And so he says that the oracle told him, one, what they have to do is make some kind of blood sacrifice, because before they went on their war campaign, King Agamemnon had sacrificed, he had sacrificed, they say one of his daughters, right? So that he could have good omens going to war with the Trojans. And so since they violated what they had going on, the agreement that they had going on with the gods were now against them. So they had to atone for their sins, basically. And they had to sacrifice somebody to account for the life that they sacrificed before they made their voyage to Troy to start the 10-year-long war. And when they consulted the oracle about who was to be sacrificed, this young lad, he says that they decided to sacrifice him. But he says that he kind of got away and ran away. Now, another part of the prophecy that he says that the oracle told him from the gods was that they had to make this offering, right? Leave this offering, this horse, as an offering to the gods. They had to sail back to their homeland, and they had to perform some rituals, right, to get better omens to then come back and go to war. So he said that the Greeks were going home to do some sacrifices to get the gods back on their side. Then they would come back and besiege the city of Troy. And he says that they made the horse so big because they did not want the Trojan people to bring it inside of the gates. It wasn't to be left for them. It was an offering for the guards, and it was supposed to stay there until they got back, right? And so they eventually believed what this young man was saying, right? They eventually believed what this young man was saying. And the story went on to say that that guy, Layla, who initially stabbed the horse, he says that some snakes came out of the sea and basically killed him. So they was like, oh my goodness. He desecrated this offering to the gods. He was wrong. And they believed that the Trojan horse was an actual good omen for the gods, and that they should take it into inside of the city so that they could have it inside of the city, so the gods would be on their side, and it would not be there when the Greeks came back to besiege them, right? And so he goes on to say, through the guile and deceit of perjured Sinon, his tale was believed, and we taken by cunning and forced tears, we that Tydeus' son and Larisan Achilles never conquered, nor 10 long years, nor 1,000 ships. Then was thrust on our notice a greater, more terrible portent, dismaying our hearts that were blind, alas, to the future. Laocoon, chosen by lot for the priesthood of Neptune, at the wanton altar was slaying a mighty bull, when lo, from Tenodos over the quiet deep, I shudder to tell you, 2 snakes with coils never ending came breasting the sea, making side by side for the shore. In front, they rose through the surge, and their blood-colored covered crests were above the waters, and behind the rest of them skimmed over the water, their huge backs twisting and writhing. So he's basically saying that they believed what the young man had said, right? He was a convincing liar, right? And so he convinced them, and so they believed him. And then they saw, like I just told you, Laocoon, he was like a priest of Neptune, right? And so he was making a sacrifice at the altar, and they're saying that 2 great snakes came up out of the ocean, attacked him, and killed him. And so based on what the young man had said, based on what they already thought from the debate, and then based on this omen of Laocoon, the priest, dying by these 2 large great snakes, after he desecrated the horse, they were thoroughly convinced that the horse was not a trick, and they decided to bring it into the city of Troy. And this is what convinced them to ultimately do it, right? And so he says, then in the shuddering hearts of us all, there crept terror unknown before, the price of his crime. Laocoon, now it was said, most justly had paid, seeing that he the sacred oak had profaned with his lance, and thrust in its back the accused spear. Let the image be drawn to the goddess's shrine, and there let supplication be made to her holy name. All cried together. We made a breach in the walls and opened the city's defenses. Everyone there girded himself for the task, slipping under its feet, easily gliding wheels, and about its neck, stretching cables of him. So basically, like they say, they saw the death of Laocoon as divine justice punishment for him stabbing the horse. So immediately they was like, you know what? We need to bring this horse in, and we need to take it to the citadel, to the statues of our goddesses, and thereby have the gods on our side, because this man died for desecrating this offering to the gods. And especially like in the ancient world, even now, people are real superstitious. But especially in the ancient world, people are superstitious, and omens and gods and sacrifice, that type of stuff meant a lot. So they were thoroughly convinced, and they brought the horse inside. Now, it's very interesting, because I'm going to read this, what he says about while they were bringing the horse inside. He says, at the very entrance, 4 times did the horse stick fast, and deep in its womb 4 times came a clashing of arms. But we, unheeding and blind with frenzy, pressed onward until we had set the thing of ill omen upon the citadel's height. So he's saying that as they were pulling the horse in, it got stuck about 4 times. And every time it would get stuck and they would pull it and it would start rolling, it would kind of like jerk, they would hear the clanking of arms inside of it, right? But not taking heed and really paying attention to what they were hearing on the inside, they ignored it and they didn't stop pulling it until they got it, how he says, upon the citadel's height. So they took it all the way up to the citadel, to where they could actually present this offering to their gods. So let's see what happens after it's in there. That night, the people of Troy, they celebrated. They celebrated the end of the war. They celebrated having this offering to the gods, and they celebrated having the gods on their side. And everybody, it was like big festivities. They got drunk. They were playing music. They were dancing. And everybody was off guard. They thought that the 10-year war was over. They felt like they had won. And they had this mighty, mighty offering. They had brought it into the city. And everyone was feeling good. So he says, wrapping in mighty darkness the earth and the sky, and the Greeks' stratagem. All through the city the Trojans sprawled silent, their weary limbs enfolded in sleep. And now did the Argive host and their marshaled fleet start moving from Tenedos under the friendly stillness of the quiet moon to the shores that they knew so well, when the royal galley had hoisted a signal of flame, and Sinon, armed by the envious doom of the gods, the pine wood bars that prisoned the Greeks within, stealthily loosed. So after night had fallen and all of the Trojans had fell asleep, drunk with wine and been partying all night, when nighttime fell, the Greeks that were hiding on the island, they started sailing back towards the city. And as they were sailing back towards the city and everybody was asleep, the Greeks that were on the inside, released by the traitor who the Trojans had led inside of the city, opened up the horse so that they could come out and unleash their fury on the city of Troy. He says, the opening wide of the horse brought them fresh air again, and gladly they left the hollow timber, Theosandrius and Sthenelus foremost, with cruel Ulysses slid down on a rope they had lowered, then Acamus, Thoeus, and then Neoptolemus. He was Peleus' son, Machion the prince, Menelaus, and he who himself had contrived the deception, Epios. Now, Epios is the guy who designed the actual horse. They seized the city, deep buried in slumber and wine, slaughtered the guards, letting in through the wide open gates their fellow attackers and plotters joined forces, right? So what happened was, as the Greek fleets were coming back to the city of Troy, they opened up the Trojan horse, right? They lowered themselves down by ropes, right, to the ground, because this horse was really, really big and immense in size. And when they came out, they drew their swords and they immediately ran up on the sleeping guards and they began slaughtering them, right? Some of them started slaughtering guards. Some of them started slaughtering innocent people, and they opened up the gates from the inside. As they opened up the gates from the inside, the Greeks had returned to the walled city of Troy, and they started flooding in and caught the Trojans off guard, and basically it was over at that point. They tried to fight back, but it was too late. You already had Greeks on the inside wreaking havoc, and you had them spilling into the open gates, wreaking havoc, and it was, you know, it was bloody. And look what the Trojan says about this time. It has come, the final day, the inescapable hour from the Dardan land. We Trojans have come to an end, with Troy and the mighty renown of the Tecrian folk. All that was ours, cruel Jove has made over to Argos. The city's on fire, and the Greeks are masters therein. The horse, standing on high in the heart of the walls, is pouring out men in arms, and Sinon, in triumph, is linking the fires together and taunting our grief. Some stand at the gates, wide open on either side, as many thousands as ever came from Mycenae. Others with weapons leveled against us have barred the narrow parts of the streets. A line made of steel stands there, the point of their swords unsheathed and agleam, ready to slaughter. The guards of the gates can hardly begin fighting, and, battling blindly, resist. At these words of the son of Authoress, inspired by the gods, I made haste to the flames and the fighting, called by the uproar, by the grim fury, by shouting that rose to the heavens. So when the Greeks got in, they basically slaughtered the Trojans wholesale, slaughtered the people of Troy wholesale. Some of them escaped, and there's actually mythological tales that the Roman people, right, the Roman people and the original rulers of the Roman people, their forefathers were actually the people from Troy. Everybody didn't die. Some of them escaped. And some stories will tell you that the people who remained of the Trojans is the ones who ultimately founded what became the Roman Empire. Okay. So again, if you want to look more into this story, you can look in Homer's work, the Odyssey. Go to book 8, right? Look in book 8, and you can read what Homer, arguably the first person to ever document, or the oldest document that we have about the war between the Greeks and the Trojans and this Trojan horse. You can go to the works of Homer and you can read that. And if you want to read the detailed version that I just explained to you guys, it's in Virgil's work called the Aeneid, right? And so we see that after a 10-year-long battle, the Greeks realized that they could not besiege the city of Troy. So they devised a stratagem, right? They built this great horse and they hid inside, okay? They also left a traitor Greek behind, right? Who convinced the people of Troy to let the horse inside of the gate. The people were so happy that they finally had won the war. They got drunk, they partied, they went to sleep. When they went to sleep, this traitor let the Trojans out. Then he began lighting fires along the wall so that the Greeks would know, as they were sailing back, that the horse was actually in, everything was going to plan, let's get him. So the Greeks made it to land, the gates to the city of Troy were open, they flooded in, massacred massive Trojans. Some of the Trojans escaped and eventually became the Roman people. So that is the original story of the Trojan horse. So when you hear someone talking about a Trojan horse, now you have more context to put it in. Maybe I'll make another video actually talking about the war itself and why the war started. I'm sure you've all heard of Helen of Troy. You know, you may be wondering what that's all about and if the modern depictions of this actually match the ancient historical records, and maybe we'll look into that. So as always, I hope I said something that you guys never heard before. If I did say something that you guys have already heard, I hope I gave more insight and more clarity into the origins of this story. Now, as always, before I go, if you like these videos, if you like what I'm doing, if you appreciate what I'm doing, if you like literature as much as I do, I would love you guys' support. I am an author myself. I do write my own books. I write fiction novels. Okay, I've already written 2 fiction novels. I'm working on my 3rd novel right now. If you want to know what these books are about, you can read the synopsis on Amazon.com. Okay, you can read the synopsis, see if it's something that you would be interested in, and I would greatly appreciate if you purchase my novels and just show some support for what I got going on. One of them is called Suicide Note. So you can go to Amazon.com, type in Suicide Note by Matthew Daniels, and you can purchase the paperback version of this one. My other novel is called Thicker Than Water, right? You can go to Amazon.com, type in Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels, and you can purchase this one, right? I would like for you guys to purchase that paperback. If you don't like paperback novels and you only read ebooks, right? You can get the ebook version of either one of my books on Amazon.com as well. You can pick the format. You can get the paperback or you can get the ebook version. You can also go to my you can go to my website, therealbookworm.com. You can order it from there. or you can go to my Facebook page. Go to my Facebook page, add me. I would appreciate it, right? Everything Matthew Daniels. My Facebook page is called Everything Matthew Daniels. You can go to the shop section. You can purchase my books from there. I also have a Facebook group called The Real Bookworm. You can find me on there. You know, find me on these various platforms, add me, and please, if you don't mind, support what I got going on. Order your copy of Suicide Note today. Order your copy of Thicker Than Water today, all right? Or order the ebook version. Okay, so thank you guys for listening as always. I appreciate it. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. Peace, I'm out.